I like to joke in social media circles that Alexandria Ocasio Cortez is going to be my future wife. So I'd hate to talk about her for 2 videos in a row lest people start to talk. But Representative Cortez made a speech last Wednesday that just can't be ignored, and we need to talk about what she discussed in this speech. In a now viral video, Cortez talked about campaign finance to the House Oversight Committee and in front of Congress, all of whom knew exactly what was going on in the speech and many of whom have participated in the activities that she was denouncing.
Let's play a lightning round game. I'm going to be the bad guy, which I'm sure half the room would agree with anyway. And I want to get away with as much bad things as possible, ideally to enrich myself and advance my interest, even if that means putting my interests ahead of the American people.
In the very opening seconds of Cortez's speech, she set the stage for what she wanted to portray and denounced anybody who disagrees with her position or anybody who partakes in any of the activities she's about to talk about as evil. A very dangerous statement in front of a Congress who has partaken in these particular activities.
So, Mrs. Hobart Flynn, I want to run. If I want to run a campaign that is entirely funded by corporate political action committees, is there anything that legally prevents me from doing that?
No.
Of course, we all remember the now famous Citizens United Supreme Court case in which the court ruled that campaign contributions are free speech and protected under the First Amendment, and corporations are made up of people, so they are protected by the amendment as well. Let's keep going.
Okay, so there's nothing stopping me from being entirely funded by corporate PACs, say from the fossil fuel industry, the healthcare industry, big pharma. I'm entirely 100% lobbyist PAC funded.
Immediately, Alexandria Ocasio Cortez went on to list some industries that may have caused problems and may be guilty of buying politicians. And this was a carefully chosen list. It was some of the big evil talking points that the Democrats who talk about campaign finance like to cite when they are talking about limiting campaign finance from corporations. Of course, she brought up the oil industry, or the fossil fuel industry as she said, the healthcare industry, which stands firmly against anything that she wants to do with her Medicare for All plan, and the big pharma industry, which goes hand in hand with the healthcare industry. Oddly enough, Cortez did not mention Planned Parenthood as one of the political action committees in her list, nor did she talk about the unions, who are a big part of the Green New Deal that she introduced last week as well.
So let's say I'm a really, really bad guy, and let's say I have some skeletons in my closet that I need to cover up so that I can get elected. Mr. Smith, is it true that you wrote this article, this opinion piece for the Washington Post entitled, "These payments to women were unseemly, that doesn't mean they were illegal"?
Well, I can't see the piece, but I wrote a piece under that headline in the Post, so I assume that's right.
Okay, great. So, green light for hush money. I can do all sorts of terrible things. It's totally legal right now for me to pay people off. And that is considered speech. That money is considered speech. So I use my special interest dark money funded campaign to pay off folks that I need to pay off and get elected.
Let's assume that the same laws apply to Congress as apply to the president as far as campaign finance goes. So yes, the Oversight Committee is correct. It is legal for you to pay somebody off using campaign finance funding, but you do need to disclose that as a campaign expenditure. That information needs to be made available to the public, and your constituency will decide whether you are fit to serve in office based on who you paid off. These are laws that are already on the books, and if you refuse or choose not to disclose this information as a campaign finance, you have committed a crime against the federal government. Michael Cohen was convicted of this, if we recall from recent history. Let's move on.
There's no limit.
So there's none. So I can be totally funded by oil and gas. I can be totally funded by big pharma. Come in, write big pharma laws, and there's no limits to that whatsoever.
That's right.
Okay, so awesome. Now, Mr. Mirabani, the last thing I want to do is get rich with as little work possible. That's really what I'm trying to do as the bad guy, right? So is there anything preventing me from holding stocks, say, in an oil or gas company, and then writing laws to deregulate that industry and that could potentially cause the stock value to soar and accrue a lot of money in that time.
You could do that.
I don't know about you, but it seems like Mr. Mirbani was very nervous to answer yes to this question. And that could have something to do with the fact that Ms. Cortez is shining a light on things that most of the American public has assumed for over a half a century. We talk in social media circles about politicians like Nancy Pelosi, who make $174,000 a year as a congresswoman, suddenly being worth well over $1 million or more depending on the politician. We even meme about it, making jokes with memes saying that politicians should be wearing jackets like NASCAR so we can see the sponsors and see who exactly owns the politicians.
Is it possible that any elements of this story apply to our current government and our current public servants right now?
Yes.
As I mentioned before, it's pretty well understood by the American people that just about everybody in Congress has taken at least one financial gift from a corporation or a political action committee in exchange for legislation. The Congressional Oversight Committee is simply confirming that at this point.
All right, so one last thing, Mr. Schaub. In relation to congressional oversight that we have, the limits that are placed on me as a congresswoman, compared to the executive branch and compared to, say, the President of the United States, would you say that Congress has the same sort of standard of accountability? Is there more teeth in that regulation in Congress on the president, or would you say it's about even, or more so on the federal?
In terms of laws that apply to the president, yeah, there's just almost no laws at all that apply to the president.
So I'm being held, and every person in this body is being held to a higher ethical standard than the President of the United States.
That's right, because there are some ethics committee rules that apply to you.
And it's already super legal, as we've seen, for me to be a pretty bad guy. So it's even easier for the President of the United States to be one, I would assume.
So in this last segment of Ms. Cortez's lightning round game, we actually see where Alexandria was going with all of this when she brought this to the House Oversight Committee. Cortez's speech seems to be leading to the idea that big companies can buy the president off and persuade him to make the laws that would enrich him and his corporate overlords, except for one flaw in Cortez's logic. Our president does not make laws. He does enforce laws. That's the position of the executive branch. But it's on Congress to make the laws that would affect these companies, not the president. Director Schwab correctly points out the fact that there are very few laws that involve the presidency and campaign finance. You've got the laws that limit the amount that a single entity can donate to a presidential campaign, and you have the same laws that apply to members of Congress. But there are more laws that apply to the ethics of Congress and the way that they can receive donations, because Congress was always intended to be the more powerful branch. The presidency was always supposed to take second place to the Congress in the lives of the people. That's why Congress makes the laws, and the president is bound to enforce the laws that Congress makes. Furthermore, Ms. Cortez, being a congressperson, is in a position to write a new law to enforce presidential campaign finance, but she would also have to make sure that it applied to the Congress as well. It is unethical for a Congress to make a law that applies to one entity or the American people, but does not apply to the Congress itself. They do make the laws, but it is highly unethical for them to do so. But if Cortez were to try and pass a law that would involve campaign finance reform and limiting the amount that political action committees could give to any particular candidate, the challenge would be getting it past a Congress that has become wealthy for doing just this. What did you think about Alexandria Ocasio Cortez's speech to the House Oversight Committee, and what do you think about campaign finance laws as they're currently written? I always welcome thoughtful and positive discussion in the comment section below, and especially over on Twitter. That is at EdsBlog Twitter with a 1 in place of the I. Thanks as always for listening to this show and supporting this channel. And remember, never take the words of bloggers, podcasters, or journalists as gospel. Find all the facts and draw your own conclusions. Take care.